I'm Terry Salmonson, for those that don't know and those that don't care. I'm still Terry Salmonson. And we're going to get the weekend kicked off with this first presentation, and hopefully you guys will enjoy it. Was anybody here last year? Well, we've got to build an audience maybe for year 3. We're planning on year 3 anyhow. Last year, as you, for those of you that attended my presentation, it was on the Green Hornet. This year it's going to be on the Lone Ranger. And if any of you that took issue with a few things I said during the presentation last year, we now have uncovered certain facts on the Green Hornet. I'd be more than glad to talk to you at the table or any time during the weekend to clear up any loose ends points like, was it Japanese or was it Filipino?
Gee, she has one question.
Okay, the purpose of this get-together is a Lone Ranger on radio. I've covered most of the program from A to Z, as it may be, on radio, screen, television, books, comics, the whole 9 yards. But my talk here today will be just on the radio and to hopefully clear up a few misconceptions and to set the record straight on a few areas. Again, urban legend keeps creeping in on some facts occasionally, and I won't use the word plagiarism, but there's been a number of things that have been printed over the years that were incorrect, and the same, almost to the punctuation and comma, is reprinted again and again and again. Once it appears in print, it becomes the gospel, and it's mighty hard to stop wrong information from being continued to be disseminated, especially with the age of the internet nowadays. The Lone Ranger, and including the Lone Ranger owners that keep propelling the same information that they have in their files, have always claimed the first broadcast was on January 30th, 1933, which is totally incorrect. There may have been, and I want to use the word very heavily, may, I don't think it happened, but there may have been a possible test broadcast several weeks before. But I doubt it based on a variety of reasons, one of which I'll give you, and that is WXYZ was one of the few non-East or West Coast communities outside of Chicago, that is, that did original productions. And they were extremely, a very successful station. They had a very packed schedule. For them to bump something that was a good moneymaker to try out a test broadcast or two of a possibility of an idea that they think might work, and based on the guiding hand of Mr. Trundle, would have been almost an impossible situation to just arbitrarily throw a show on. The show's first broadcast that I've been able to document, and as far as I'm concerned, it is the first broadcast, was on January 31st, 1933. Now, for all of you that will run off to your 200-year calendars and will go January of the year 1933, you'll see the 31st is on a Tuesday. Now, obviously, Salmonson's got to be wrong because it was a Monday, Wednesday, Friday show. It was a Monday, Wednesday, Friday show after November of 1933. From January 31st, 1933, all the way up until November 29th of 1933, it was a Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday show at 8 o'clock. One of the reasons that it would never have gone on Monday, Wednesday, Friday was WXYZ had several shows that were absolute hit, bona fide moneymakers, and they weren't going to move the schedule around for that. One of them was the Manhunters and a number of other shows that they were producing locally there. And so they had slots open on Tuesday, Thursdays, and Saturdays, and that's where the show stayed until the broadcast when they changed on November 29th. And that's when it went over to Saturday or Monday, Wednesdays, and Fridays. And then also with a sponsor called Gordon Baking Company for Silver Cup bread. Now, Silver Cup is always remembered as the sponsor, but in reality, it wasn't Silver Cup. They stayed for about 2 years. But for some particular reason, everybody remembers Silver Cup for all the sponsorship over the years, and that was not. I'll get to some of the other sponsors a little bit later. First premium just like the Lone Ranger was. And they weren't, they didn't know how well the show was doing and what kind of an audience rating they had at that point. This was, after all, only show number 46. And they had a slight difference of potential on what we had to give away versus what's requested. And in one of the WXYZ newsletters that I have, they reported that they received 24,905 requests for these 300 guns that they had to give away. So they knew right then they had a hit show. This was also the first broadcast of a longtime actor that would fill the role of the Lone Ranger. Digressing a little bit here, the show started with a man by the name of George Stinius, who was the first Lone Ranger. And he was the Lone Ranger for the first 43 shows. He later went on to, and one of the reasons he left the role was he went off to Hollywood, changed his name, and became George Seaton, who was a very lucrative, very respected and good director out there. They went through a couple of different Lone Rangers very quickly, in quick succession. Jack Deeds on May 11th, 1933, whose real name was Lee Trent, posed the role as the Lone Ranger. He was, at the time, a student at Wayne State, along with some of the other actors that were at WXYZ. And they thought Deeds would make a good Lone Ranger. He certainly had the voice range and everything. But in those days, they did 3 broadcasts a night. Once for the East Coast, one for the Midwest, and one for via telephone lines for the West Coast. And there was a break between the second and third show. And a lot of the actors would go down to a place called the Alcove, which was a local watering hole. They'd have dinner. Some of them would do a little libation going. And Deeds was so intimidated by Jim Jules, the director, who was a pretty heavy-handed director, that he had a little more than he needed to be drinking. And by the time he made it through the night, but when he showed up for the next broadcast date 2 days later, they said there was no way this guy was going to handle it, because he was already smashed when he walked into that week, knowing what he was going to be expected to see. So Jules himself stepped into the role for one broadcast on May 13th, 1933. And after that, they replaced him with a man by the name of Graja. And Graja, of course, stayed in the role until he was killed April 8th, 1941. The first Tonto appearance was on script number 12. For the first few weeks, the Lone Ranger mostly talked a lot louder. It was hoarse a lot to let the audience know what the action was going on, and they figured they couldn't have him continuing to talk. It was hoarse all the time. So they brought in the character of Tonto. Graja, like I said, he did 1,234 shows before he was killed in an automobile accident. He basically fell asleep at the wheel of a car on the way home from a party. Was not going to sleep, and ran into the back end of a parked truck on Grand River in Farmington, Michigan. Pardon me? And he was probably only, I don't think he was more than 3 miles from the house. And his home, I lived about 4 miles from where the Graja home is, and still is today. It served for many years as a bed and breakfast, and people would find it rather neat. I got to sleep in the Lone Ranger's home, but it's no longer a bed and breakfast now.
Is there any plaques?
There is the community put a flag up about 4 years ago, 5 years ago, and it's privately owned now, and the owners allowed me about 6 years ago to go through and extensively digitally film the entire house, including some of the original timbers that were used as foundations for the house that was built in the early 1800s. So it's very interesting to see, and of course